Hello everyone. Welcome back to Introduction to Business 30. Again, this is Module 6, Achieving World-Class Operations. And this lesson deals with an introduction to operations management. So what we're going to do in this particular lesson is look at the following aspects of operations management. We're going to begin with the definition of operations management. I'm going to go through some textbook definitions, but I'm also going to show you a breakdown, a bit of the features that go into an operations management definition, and I'm going to try to connect this to a real-world application that hopefully will be of interest to you. The second thing that I want us to do in this particular lesson is to look at what's called competitive dimensions. There are four major competitive dimensions from an operations management context, and we're going to spend some time going through each of the four dimensions. I'm going to provide examples of those particular dimensions, as well as the key decisions from an operations management perspective that need to be made if you want to compete on any of those four competitive dimensions. So let's begin. First, let's start with a basic definition of operations management. I'm going to use the abbreviation OM throughout this material to refer to operations management. But if you were to look in the textbook that you have for this particular course, or in any other textbook that deals with operations management, you're going to find something along the lines of the slide that's indicated right in front of you. Basically, operations management it's a process. Actually, in more detail, it would be called a transformation process. It's a process of transforming inputs into outputs to create something. We could create a product, we could deliver a service, and the ultimate goal is to ensure that that product or service is of value to the people that are buying it, whether it's a customer or a client. So the whole definition of OM would read something like, again, a transformation process to take inputs and do something with them to produce outputs on the other end. Again, with the goal of being able to deliver value-added products or services to the people that are buying those products or services. What I've done in the definition that you see on the PowerPoint is I've bolded and underlined key aspects of the operations management definition. I want you to really emphasize, or I want to emphasize the notion here that OM is a process. That what we're trying to do basically is look at how things are done, how are decisions made, what types of vital points need to be considered if an organization, for example, wants to provide exceptional quality in its particular products or services. So what we're doing here is we're adopting a process focus. Again, with the ability to look at how inputs are transformed into outputs. So, if you end up getting confused or you want a simple schematic to remember operations management throughout the rest of this module, this is something that I do actually in the university courses that I teach when we're going through operations management. I write up on the chalkboard that we basically have a simple schematic like this. The letter I on the left-hand side stands for inputs. Letter O on the right-hand side stands for outputs. The question mark in the middle is operations management. Operations management, again, is that transformation process that's taking inputs and doing something with them to produce outputs on the other side. So the I question mark O, again, can be a simple schematic that you might want to jot down or remember as a way of really capturing the essence of operations management. Now, I don't know how many of you here like the Far Side cartoons, but I often will do this in my courses to just let people have a bit of a chuckle or a laugh and to see how the Far Side cartoonists might describe operations management. So here's a cartoon that appeared many years ago. So on the left-hand side is an example of good operations management. So what you see in this particular situation is a stagecoach operator that has to follow a series of steps. There's a process to take inputs and to produce an output that is of value to his customer or client. So in this particular case, the horses would be an input. The stagecoach operator is an input. His passenger in the stagecoach, her ability to arrive safely at the destination would be the output of the process. And notice in this case that there's a process that the stagecoach operator follows. There's a sequence of steps from A through F that are orchestrated to basically deliver an effective service to this particular client, so we end up with a safe arrival at the destination. So that's good operations management from a far side perspective. Here's not so good operations management. And what you notice in this case is that the stagecoach operator did something disastrous. Yes, he stopped the runaway stage, but obviously in this situation, it wasn't really a good outcome for the horses involved. So a bit of a chuckle there in terms of good operations management and not so good operations management. Again, OM, operations management, is the process of taking inputs and producing outputs on the other side. So imagine that you were running an airline or operating an airport terminal. Operations management will be a vital aspect of the work that you would do in your particular daily activities. What I want you to do for a minute is to just think of all the inputs that might come into play with operations management in running an airline. Think of the transformation processes that would need to be undertaken as part of the overall perspective of running an airline. And think of the outputs on the other side. So you might want to take just a minute or two, maybe pause the video or pause the presentation here for a second, and just jot down the inputs, the transformation processes, and the outputs involved in running an airline. What I'm going to do is just go ahead now and show you a few of the ideas that I would bring forward if I were thinking of inputs, transformation processes, and outputs in running an airline. Here's what you might have for inputs. Obviously, if you're operating an airline, it's a good idea to have airplanes. If you don't have an airplane, it's a pretty difficult undertaking to take passengers from point A to point B. So if you have airplanes, you probably need flight crews. You need people that will be in charge of the safety of the airplane when it's in motion. It's a good idea also to have baggage handlers. If you don't have baggage handlers, it's a pretty difficult undertaking for passengers to get their luggage safely from one destination to another. You might need scheduling personnel. You'll need people who will orchestrate the scheduling of flights, the assignment of flight crews to particular flight legs or segments. You also might need pilots. It's a really good idea to have pilots that are actually going to fly these airplanes. So you can see all the different inputs that you would have if you were operating an airline. And by the way, I pointed at the bottom of the slide, another key bit of input you would have is information. Now, often when we think of inputs, we think of more of the tangible inputs. We think of raw materials, or we think of people, or we think of products. We think of tangible things that would be an input to an overall process. But information can be an important input as well. If the information is poor, inaccurate, or lacking, then you're going to end up with poor, inaccurate, or lacking operations management, or very unreliable decisions. So information, management insight, knowledge can also be key inputs in an operations management process. How about transformation processes? Well, once you have all your inputs orchestrated and set up, it's a good idea to have a way of transforming those inputs so you can actually do something with them. You're going to need a way of ensuring that the correct plane is selected for a certain flight. If you're operating a flight from Saskatoon to, let's pick a destination close, like Edmonton, so it's a very short flight, I doubt you want to operate with a Boeing 777, like one of those huge jumbo jets. It would be such a short flight that it would be meaningless to operate such a huge airplane on such a short flight. If you're flying from, I don't know, I'll pick like Vancouver to Honolulu, I doubt you want to do it in a really small plane because passengers would get quite cramped for such a long flight. So you want to make sure that the right plane is picked for the right flight. You want to make sure that your baggage gets routed correctly. I don't know how many of you have taken airline flights in the past, but often lost baggage becomes a key issue that organizations deal with, and it's a source of frustration for passengers. You want to coordinate your flights with airports. If Air Canada had all of the flights into Saskatoon arriving within a 30-minute window and then nothing else the rest of the day, I don't think the Saskatoon Airport and its passengers would be very happy. You want to spread them out throughout the day so that they are balanced with the demand of when people want to fly. So those are some of the transformation processes that you would need to have if you're operating an airline. How about outputs? Well, at the end of the day, your outputs are safe passengers. So you will want the ability to provide safety for your passengers and a good flight. They arrive at their destinations on time with their baggage. I think another key output in your operations management process for operating an airline would be satisfied flight crews, satisfied pilots, and other staff members like baggage handlers, maintenance people. You'll want a way of being able to ensure that you're delivering an effective product and service that meets the needs of your staff as well as the needs of your customers. You could take any particular application that you would see in the real world. You could think of running a potash mine and all the different inputs, transformation processes, and outputs that will be involved there. How about if you were operating an amusement park like Disneyland? Think of the inputs, transformation processes, and outputs that will be key part of that specific decision-making area. Again, so that's an overview of inputs, transformation processes, and outputs. Oh, by the way, here's an example of BADOM in an airport. I mentioned that it all sounds pretty good, that you basically ensure that you have the right inputs, you have the transformation processes and the outputs. Obviously, you can get situations when things may run into a bit of a gridlock or a bottleneck or a log jam. Here's an example in an airport. Obviously, there's been a situation with respect to weather challenges or flight delays, but you've got a whole lot of people waiting for flights in a very congested terminal. Let's have a short discussion about competitive dimensions, because that's an important part of operations management. The wording that's often used in the operations management literature is called dominant vector. Now, that sounds maybe mathematical or something like from a physics class, but dominant vector is a term that we use to identify that there's some organization that does something better than its competitors, and because it's able to do something better than its competitors, that helps it to drive value for its customers. So a dominant vector is an advantage that an organization has over its competitors. It's something upon which it can build competitive dimension and build a very effective operations management strategy. So this notion of dominant vector is very important. Let me give you a couple examples of dominant vectors from the real world. Now, you know that I'm a huge sports fan, so obviously I'm going to start with some sort of sports example at the start. Wayne Gretzky, arguably one of the greatest hockey players to have ever laced on a pair of skates. It was widely believed that his dominant vector was his peripheral vision. There are some folks that have estimated that his peripheral vision, his ability to see side to side, was 30% broader than the average person. Maybe that's a reason why he was able to do so well for so long. He established scoring records that may never be touched. Again, that could have been one of Wayne Gretzky's dominant vectors. Here's another example. Marilyn Vos-Savant is a columnist, author, and a lecturer throughout the world. She actually, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, has been acclaimed as having the world's highest IQ, which she was tested out at 190. Perhaps the IQ, the intellectual quotient for Marilyn Vos-Savant is her dominant vector. Again, she's able to use this to basically give speeches and write columns, to help people work through problems, to basically solve things and to demonstrate her smartness, her ability to be a well-respected person in her field. Again, her dominant vector could be the IQ. Well, let's look at competitive dimensions from an operations management context. There are 4 of them that we typically have from an OM perspective. 1, cost. 2, quality. 3, speed of delivery. And 4, flexibility or customization. What I'm going to do for each one of these is describe them in some detail and then illustrate the key decisions that are made as part of each of these competitive dimensions. Let's begin with cost. If you select cost as your dominant vector or as your competitive dimension, what you want to do is basically be able to be the lowest cost provider of the product or service. I show the example in the notes here of Dollarama, which might be an example of a company that aims to be a low-cost provider of a product or service, where everything is $1 or a little bit more. Now, if your organization wants to compete on the basis of cost, what does it need to do? Well, it may need to offer low wages to staff, because I doubt you want to pay really, really high wages, because that would destroy your profit margin. Number two, you want to be able to ensure that you can sell huge volumes. The ability to effectively compete on the basis of cost. In order to do that, you need to sell huge, huge volumes. You also want to negotiate low prices for the stuff you get from your suppliers. So if you are purchasing items to sell in your store, you want to be able to get them on very attractive terms, in other words, very low prices. Quality. Quality is another one of the dominant vectors or competitive dimensions in operations management. This could involve a very prestigious product or service, like a Ferrari. I wish that was my vehicle, but unfortunately it's not. Maybe the image, could be exceptional service. I'm going to say more about quality in our next module, but from a key decisions perspective, if an organization wanted to compete on the basis of quality, what would it need to do? I think a couple of things would be important, would be identifying a marketing strategy that would showcase your quality products and services. Notice here the alignment between operations management and marketing. Hopefully you're seeing in this course that none of the different disciplines are in silos. They're not totally separate. There is linkages between all of the dimensions that we look at in the field of business. If you're competing on the basis of quality, a good idea to purchase the best quality inputs that you've got. And maybe hire very highly trained staff, because you're offering exceptional service. You're offering that exceptional, exquisite quality in your products and services. How about speed of delivery? Here's an example of a UPS truck. We think of UPS maybe providing overnight service or next day service. If you want to offer reliability or quick service, then your competitive dimension, your dominant vector, would be speed of delivery. So if you want to be able to do that, if you want to compete on the basis of speed of delivery, what do you need to do? The key term here is logistics. You need to be able to orchestrate the movement of products to ensure that product A is getting from place A to place B as quickly as possible. Maybe you want to offer different rate structures. By that I mean, if you want to provide overnight delivery, then you've got to have different prices set up. So if there are customers who are willing to pay for that, here's the rate you would offer them if they're willing to pay for overnight service versus 2 or 3 day service. You want to make a tremendous investment in information technology to be able to track where stuff is when it's moving from point A to point B, so you can provide your customers with ready information in terms of where things are in the overall chain of getting from you to the customer. How about flexibility or customization? That's the last of the competitive dimensions we're going to talk about right now. Here you're looking at variety in your products and services. I give you an example in the slides of Dell Computers. Now that's not the only organization in the world that competes on the basis of customization, but it's a good one. It's a good example to look at. Dell Computers would provide any computer you want according to your specific needs, you being the customer. So if an organization wants to compete on the basis of flexibility or customization, what would it need to do? Maybe again, invest in some very highly trained staff. You want to have what's called quick changeovers. Now it's an important operations management concept. And what it means is that you've got the ability to change over quickly from one product to another. So if they're producing something and they want to produce, say, a different product or offer a different service, then it takes them a very short time to make the change to doing something else. Organizations that compete on the basis of customization or flexibility need to have quick changeovers. A third thing that you might look at is what's called modular product development. That's what Dell is really good at doing. They can offer customization to their customers because in that particular case, they work on the basis of these modules coming together in producing Dell computers. We sometimes will also see that in the production of and construction of new homes, where it's done on a modular basis that allows customization or flexibility to the client or customer. So anyway, that is a discussion of an introduction to operations management, as well as a brief overview of the dominant vectors or competitive dimensions: cost, quality, speed of delivery, and finally flexibility or customization. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in lesson 3.